We're gonna make some Fleischpflanzerl today, which in English is probably like cutlets. In Estonian it's kotletit, so that's similar enough. And you probably can't get this if you live in America, but this is 50% pork and 50% beef mincemeat. And ground, really, not properly minced. And I prefer that over beef, just straight beef, and I prefer it over just straight pork. So, yeah, this is 400 grams, and my recipe calls for 3 pounds, so I'll just have to adjust as we go, which I do every time. I should probably write it down at some point. But just one smallish onion is plenty. I guess I'll read you the ingredients in the meantime. We've got, this calls for 3 pounds of beef and pork, so 1.5 pounds of each. 400 grams is like just shy of a pound, so I'm going to use like 1/3 of the recipe. It calls for 1 to 2 onions, 4 eggs. It says 4 slices worth of breadcrumbs. I'd just put in like, I don't know, a cup or 2, cup and a half maybe. 2 teaspoons of marjoram, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1.5 teaspoons salt and pepper. So for us, I'm just going to use 1 egg because I can't use 1/3 of 4 eggs, so I'll just use 1 egg. I use a deciliter of breadcrumbs, I think I use a deciliter, I can't remember. And then, like, what is that? What's 2 divided by 3? Okay, so 2/3 of a teaspoon of marjoram, and then 1/3 of a teaspoon of paprika, and a little less than 1 teaspoon of salt is what we'll use. And the onion should be sliced as finely as you possibly can. If you can't slice it finely enough, then it will be crunchy inside. If you do this a few times and you have trouble every time, then instead you can cook the onion first before you put it in, which is fine too. I've tried a recipe that did that, and that was fine. I definitely prefer just the sliced fine onion that cooks through while it's cooking. It's easier and more time efficient, basically. Okay, that's probably good enough. So Fleischpflanzerl, I guess I should explain, they're German, like, meat patty, basically. And this recipe, I think, comes from Oma, my Oma. And at least that's what it says in this recipe book that my mom put together. And It was like my very favorite thing to eat, basically. And we didn't have it all that often when I was a kid, but I would ask for it for my birthday. And so I have fond memories. And now we have it all the time. And I still like it. Every time. Just as much. So, let's see, what are we saying? A little bit less than 2 teaspoons of salt. Like that. Bring this over here. And then 2/3 teaspoon of iodine. Probably something like that. And oh jeez, is this empty? Not quite. Right, about like that. 1/3 teaspoon. I have made this where I've put like way too much of either of these spices in it, and it's not as good. I don't know why you can't like make the flavor more intense, but it kind of wrecks it. Okay. Then just egg and breadcrumbs, right? Yeah, just like that. So at some point, you will have to get your hands dirty, but I don't like sticking my hands in the raw egg, so I always mix it up with a fork first. At least it gets rid of that weird slimy texture. I remember when I was a kid, this seemed to take like forever, which maybe it's because we made so much more than I do now. But like the whole process of making Fleischpflanzerl was like half a day, is what it seemed like to me. Which is probably just because I was impatient, but usually we can whip these up pretty quick. It is important to like make sure it's thoroughly kneaded, because you want the like all the seasonings and everything to be well distributed, and also the texture will be improved immensely if all those like, I don't know how to put it, like ground beef strands are mashed up. And as you mash it, the proteins will basically form these long strings, making it stick to itself. And then when you cut it open, it will have a nice texture. Okay, and that looks about right to me. Then, to form them, I usually just take like some chunk. I try and make like a golf ball sized ball. You can make them bigger. I remember when I was a kid, I made them much larger than I do now, but you can just leave them like this and make them as meatballs, but they cook for longer and I'm hungry, so I'm not gonna do that. Instead, just make them kind of thin. They'll shrink a bit, so you can like kind of contract and become a little thicker and a little thinner at the same time, like less wide but thinner. So you can make them pretty flat. And I used to like get the pan hot and like put them right into the pan, but it was kind of hard to manage because the first ones will be needing to be flipped and you're still have your hands all dirty with Fleischpflanzerl. So now I make them all first. It's easier that way. We are ready to cook. So I think probably the best way to cook these is on like medium heat, medium high-ish, I guess. And you don't have to actually put fat in the pan. Like you could use just like a vegetable oil or butter, either way would be fine. I wouldn't use olive oil because I don't know, olive oil is just such a specific ingredient and there's no reason to fry with it unless you're like Italian, basically. So these are not Italian, so we will not be frying them in olive oil. I think I don't know, I don't really want to use butter right now. I'll probably just use a little bit of vegetable oil since this is cast iron and I do want some fat in there before I put the Fleischpflanzerl in the pan. But that's not necessary, especially if you have like non-stick or something, then you don't need to do that. If you're using what's it called, stainless steel, then yeah, you for sure need fat in the pan and you need a hot pan. And then yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't recommend using a stainless steel. I would definitely use cast iron or non-stick, preferably cast iron. But yeah, you do not need much fat, just like, oh, that was already too much. Tiny bit to make it so they're not going into a dry pan. To make sure they're done, I'll make sure they reach 72 degrees Celsius, which, I don't know, that's maybe like 140 or something, 142, 44, I'm not certain, but
161.
Oh, 161 Fahrenheit, so 72 Celsius. And that's just like the standard for meats, like ground meats or anything like that. And sausages should all be cooked to that temperature. Like when I was a kid, we just cut one open, and if it wasn't pink, it was done. But I don't know, I like my fancy thermometer, so I use it. I found they turn out like nicer looking if you kind of push them down into the pan, kind of flatten them out. If you're worried about them like getting cooked through, you could put a lid on here, but I don't use that. I've never found that to be a big issue as long as you don't have the temperature up too high. if you're anything like me, you'll be very tempted to try and make a pan sauce with what's left in here, but it turns out kind of burnt tasting because you just cook for so long. Like this stuff from the first batch has been cooking in there for like 30 minutes. So there's enough stuff in there that's burnt that it doesn't taste good. So that's a bummer, but you can't really do that. But yeah, I'll see, where is it? There they are, way over there. It's been 45 minutes since we started filming, so I probably could have shaved down another like 10 minutes. I probably could have fit it in 2 batches instead of 3, but that's okay. Presto. So usually we have these like pasta or mashed potatoes or potato salad if we spend enough time to do that. Mm-hmm. But the original recipe says to bread them, like cover them in breadcrumbs. Yeah. But I don't like it that way anymore. I mean, I always had it that way until very recently. And the reason is because I found that the breadcrumbs just kind of soak up the fat and they don't really add like any great texture or flavor or anything else. So it's kind of just extra fat for no reason. So this is how I do them now. And they're tasty. Mm-hmm. Bon appetit.